Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. This week, we're going to learn the mimer of 40 years ago of Shabbos Hagadol. Although this Shabbos is not Shabbos Hagadol, although some Rabbonim do give their Shabbos Hagadol drasha, their sermon to prepare for Pesach, because Shabbos Hagadol is Erev Pesach, the day before Pesach. It's also a very unique mimer. Every mimer is a unique mimer, very historic Farbrengen. Actually, I had the privilege and merit to attend the Farbrengen 40 years ago, Shabbos Hagadol. As a matter of fact, the Rebbe told the story in that Farbrengen about my father's Gesund und Stark. And as every Farbrengen, especially now it's after 40 years, it has extra energy and strength to help us in what it is that we need help with to overcome our own challenges and obstacles. So the Dibra Maschil, this mimer begins with something which we are familiar with from the Friday evening service, those who daven Nusach Hari, Nusach Sfard. Nusach Ashkenaz says at this point in davening on Friday evening at the end of Kabbalah Shabbos, they say B'mem Adlikin, the Mishnah. But those of Nusach Sfard, those follow more the Kabbalistic tradition, have this prayer, and the Rebbe explains it, and we try to relate it to our own lives too. That's obviously what Shabbos is about and what it's all about. Kegavna de'inu misyachdin le'elo be'echod ufhochi ihi isyachd das lasata beroza de'echod lemeve imhein le'elo chod lekovil chod. So the word Kegavna means as it is. As it is in this way, it's the same way somewhere else. So the way in the supernal realm, the midas, the attributes, are really not yet divided into subdivisions into what they are in a practical sense, because in its essence, everyone is one. And really, this is in part of our life too. We have the intellect, and we have the attributes and the emotions, and how we act and how we conduct our lives. So there's the particulars, and then there's more of the general sense of who we are and what our soul is. So Shabbos is the time that we focus on the true purpose of creation, the time that we have to see ourselves as fulfilling what God wants in creation and emulating God, because God created us in His image. So we say that just like the attributes are really all one in their source, in the supernal realm, they also are able to unite in this mystery, the mystery of one, and they will, and if we take it actually to use the actual translation, the way it's translated in our Siddur, and we'll talk about it a little bit more, but it's on Shabbos, and the Rebbe will explain it here, the world is permeated with holiness, and the world is elevated to the holier supernal realm. So there's also the idea of a parallel tract of unity, that the world is now in its purpose, just like the first Shabbos of creation, when God says Vayechulu Hashemayim v'Oretz, everything was finished, but then it's able to then fulfill its purpose. So just as they, the six spheres, divine attributes, unite above into oneness, so she, Malchus, kingship, unites below into the mystery of oneness. Malchus is the practical sphere that includes within it all of the previous attributes, and then it pervades it, it brings it out to how they have to be used in a useful sense. So Malchus, therefore, is also the female sphere. It develops, and it gives birth, etc. So it unites below into the mystery of oneness, so as to be with them above, unity paralleling unity. Then the Malchus also unites with all of the spheres. If you do a mimer, the Rebbe will talk now in detail about these things. But first, the Rebbe says, if you do a mimer, Rabbi Rabbeinu Hazokin. Shabbos Lifnei Pesach D'Shnas Tovkov Samachez. The Alter Rebbe has a mimer. That was the mimer of the Shabbos before Pesach in the year of 5,568, which is 214 years ago. 216 years ago, which is the gematria of the Dan Natzach, and it's a multiple of Chai, but that's neither here nor there. Tzemach Tzedek quotes this mimer in his work of Eira Torah, and when he quotes it, he says that it's Mikisvei Merivachami Zal Me'admur Nishmasa Eden B'Tovkuf Samach Shabbos Hagadol. There, Tzemach Tzedek actually calls it Shabbos Hagadol from the writings of my father-in-law, my teacher and father-in-law, of blessed memory. That was, of course, the Alter Rebbe's son, which was the Tzemach Tzedek's uncle. Tzemach Tzedek's mother was the Alter Rebbe's daughter. Her brother was the Mittler Rebbe, his uncle, and his father-in-law. He married his cousin. And so he quotes his father. And Shezeu HaMaimer HaNitvus B'Siderim Dach. This is the Chassidic Discourse that expounds on these topics, which is printed in the work called the Siddur with Chassidus, Divrei Elokim Chaim, Words of God. Now that work is attributed both to the Alter Rebbe and the Mittler Rebbe, because it's the Chassidus of the Alter Rebbe, the way the Mittler Rebbe expounds on it and teaches it. The Mittler Rebbe wrote it from his father's teaching. And he, Shehu HaNochas Urashim Esad Murhem Tzoi, ובנמצא שאין זה במים רבנו הזוקן, שנרשם על ידי אדמו"ר המצוי, ובתייס האורץ וביורם עצמך צדק. So the Rebbe says what comes out, that it's from the Alter Rebbe of Shneur Zalman, and it's written by the Mittler Rebbe, his son Rabbi Dov Ber, and it has additional notations and explanations from the Tzemach Tzedek, from the third Rebbe, and it's by al yedei shleishes of his Chassidus. Therefore it's explained through the three patriarchs of Chassidus Chabad, Kefi shenikroim beloshon Chassidim, as the Chassidim called them. They are the three patriarchs. And the interesting to note that the footnote here, the reference is to Likutei Levi Yitzchak from the Rebbe's father, where they're also referred to as the three patriarchs of Chassidus. Now here's what Alter Rebbe explains. Now we're going to get some of these topics. We're going to touch upon them. We're not going to go into it in its proper depth, because we're going to try to keep the context of the bigger picture here. But of course, all this has to be expounded on more, especially since these are deep-rooted Kabbalistic topics. When it says they unite, they become one. So first of all, the Zohar, which is the source of this passage, says at the beginning, it's talking about the six midas. So that's how we know when you say just like they. So who's the they? The they is what the Zohar says a little earlier, that it's the six attributes which are called Zod Zer Ampin, which is called the small face, so to speak. It's referred to in Kabbalistic language for various reasons that we discussed. And also, when it gets dimension, it's also the idea of the six dimensions, and each one, it's also drawn in a certain sense. They're called the six, not angles, but let's just say you use the word dimensions, even though it means the ends of a line. Let's say that's not a everlasting line of Zoh. The inun vov tzadus misyachdin le'ilo b'atzilus. Now, in the world of Atzilus, which is the closest to God, which is then in the way we look at it in our frame of reference, that is God. It's so godly at that point. But so therefore they're just what we would say potential. So when something is there potentially, even though it's all one and it hasn't yet turned into and split off into what it will become, it is already there. But there it's in total, it fused together totally as one thing, and therefore united with the Matzil, which is God the one who makes the world of Atzilus. Shenikra Echad, it's called one. one and only. It's all still part of God. And therefore, there it's a level of just one in its total simplicity. And that's the infinite light, the unlimited light of God. Actually so. So now, how could we understand this? These are tough concepts. Well, let's look at our own in attributes the way it is with the person here on this world. Our attributes are in the image and like the attributes of our Creator. The Talmud tells us, you are called Adam. Why is humankind called Adam, which is, of course, the name of the first human being, but it also is the name of the species of the humankind? Why is it called Adam? Al Shem Adam Elyon. Because the word Adam also has the connotation and letters of Adama, which means similar to the supernal one. So we're created in God's image. Now, what is a person? A person is the way they act, their personality, the way they express themselves. That's their attributes. So that's fundamental within the person. So therefore, the attributes are fundamental within God. But God, before and in His essence, is not yet expressing anything. He expresses through creation. But what is expressed? The unity, the oneness of what God is. Like we understand from what is explained in Tanya Shikra, the primary occupation and workload that we have is to refine our attributes, to refine our character traits, to refine how we act. That's all our midas. The 7 midas. Now, we also have the intellect, but again, the intellect, and in other Mamorim, the Rebbe doesn't say it here, but other Mamorim that we've learned, the Rebbe says that when Mashiach comes, we'll be preoccupied with how to hone and refine the intellectual characteristics. But now the purpose of the intellectual characteristics and working with them is for the purpose of the characteristics of our heart and of how we express ourselves and of how we are. So naturally speaking, the attributes, the way they are are each one are unique. They're all unique, and therefore they're divided, they're split up, they're not the same. Each one is different. Kindness, and then severity, the temper and the flow, and etc., etc. Then the fusion of them, and perseverance, etc., etc. So the midas are each their own unique thing. But since the source of the root of the characteristics and attributes are all included in their source, which is in the intellect, which is in the brain, which is in the intellectual capacity, which is within the head, over there, it's one thing. It's going to be this person, the expression of this individual, this being. The Seder is more than that. Even within the heart, in other words, within their potential to be their own expressive characteristics before they express themselves and go out in a revealed sense in the heart, there's still just one thing, because it's still the person. It's not the kind person, but it's the person who's being described. Similarly, we understand with the supernal characteristics of Atzilus. We can only discuss them once we're referring to them here, where it's already they've broken out of Atzilus. In other words, they're not there, because within Atzilus itself, it's all just the emanation of God and godliness in its purest sense. So therefore, that's the way all the attributes there are just all one thing. It's God. So when they come here in the level of what we refer to as light, which is more like the energy, the vessel, the container, and being able to have this as something that can be useful and expressed, then they're already unique, and therefore it's called, they're separated off. Each one has its own uniqueness, its own division. But when they're still in the sense of their what's called here light, which is a reference to like their energy and what the goal is, what they will be. Therefore, they're still in the sense of the intellectual part of what's called father and mother, avoin, which means what will then have this offspring of these characteristics. But when it's still at its root source, they're just one. Therefore, it says in this passage of the Zohar, which we use in the prayer, just as they are in their source before they were expressed as midas, these 6 midas, the way they are one in the supernal realm as one, then also the same way they are then united within the Malchus here on the lower realm. The this is a reference to the 6 midas of the level of Malchus of Atzilus, because remember that Malchus is in Atzilus too. We're going to say something very interesting about it, but Malchus is also the combination of all of the Spheres. And there they can't be practical yet in Atzilus. And here on the lower realm they are, but they're the sum of the 6 parts that make it up, the other Spheres. I think I skipped here. The way the Malchus of Atzilus then can come down into the Bri, Yitzir, and Asiyah, the subsequent 3 worlds, because there it has now an identity. It can be described as something, because when everything's in Atzilus, it's all very, very godly. So once they're in the level of the worlds, there it's unique already. Separated off. They are also then able to be fused and really one, and expressive as all of them together, because of the wisdom and understanding, which are also always one, of Malchus. They're also part of Malchus, and therefore that gives it its uniqueness. In such a way, and here's what the Rebbe explains, that this fusion, which happens in the supernal realms, where there is expression, where Malchus is something which is unique, but therefore it has to be, by definition, something which has its own dimension and its own identity, made up of whatever the other midas are, but then it's not like it is in the source. So he says then that this fusion, which is going to go here, will be similar, Kegavna, like where it's in its root, where it hasn't yet broken down into these 6 unique spheres. In their source, they are totally still one, which will become these 6. But at their source, this fusion of these 6 spheres of Zoh, these 6 dimensions, they are totally one, because it hasn't yet broken out yet. It's just in a potential. Whereas in the lower realm, it already has been expressed as such. So with the fusion, the way it is here, that they're all one in this Malchus, the Isyachadas Lesato Beraza de Echad Bilvad, there they are one that's made up of all the parts that you're already able to see, and they are able to fuse and come together. But they're not really one. They're one because they are a bunch of things stuck together. want to point out an interesting thing here, and this may be just totally a side thing, but this mimer was set 40 years ago, which was the 100th anniversary of Tov Reish Mem Hey, and it's set in the week of the yahrzeit of the Rebbe Rashab. The fifth Rebbe's yahrzeit is the 2nd of Nisan. 6 days later was the Shabbos. We only have one mimer of the Rebbe Rashab from that year, from 140 years ago, which was 100 years prior to this mimer. And in that mimer, one of the things that he speaks about is the levels of Chassidus, which is, I don't want to say a cousin of this, but it's this topic where it's called Akudim Nekudim Uvrudim, named for the way the sheep are referred to in Jacob's ploy to get the striped sheep that were born off of the white sheep of his father-in-law, etc., as we know that story. And in Chassidus, it explains the way the midas are, the way they're fused the three different ways, the way they are actually separate, the way they are one in this source, and the way they are one, but they're all stuck together, but you can see that they're made up, they're all contained in one place. And it's interesting that concept is discussed in that mimer. I don't see it referenced here, but I just want to point it out, just in the historical context, and if it's not pertinent or correct, so the good Lord should forgive us. But as long as we're thinking about God and godliness and trying to understand these things, that's what our task is. You know, when we study Chassidus, we have to see how it gels with other things in Chassidus that we learn. Everything is really one, because that's what this is all about. Kegavna dinim misyachtin. It's all one thing, just the details and the way they are sourced and rooted, and what the purpose and the goal is. Okay. Umamshich lemevi imein le'ela chod lekavel chod. He continues, in order to be one with the supernal one, and it'll be a parallel type of one. It'll be comparative. Chad lekabel chad, Pirush. The Rebbe is going to explain this. At first, this fusion of putting together all the spheres and the be malchus is only similar, Kegavna, to the way the fusion is supernally. It's only in the mystery, in the secret of how one works. But it's not yet really one. It's still each sphere is individual. It's still, and they can be competitive. They can be competing. They can be not united. But then this malchus, which contains in it the other spheres, goes up from the world of Bria to the world of Atzilus, and then it is fused with the Zoh, the malchus, which is the culmination of the sum parts of the six spheres, now unites and fuses with them. There it's called like the fusion of a male and female, and one parallel to the other one, actually so. There should be one with one. In other words, it's one thing. And that they bring out the offspring of the characteristics of how one conducts their life. And that's what it's about. In order to use all of these capabilities. When does this happen? This happens on Shabbos. Shabbos is the time where all of the worlds are elevated to the level of Atzilus, meaning the spiritual worlds, and then we and mirroring that in our physical world. Everything is on a holier plane. And then we have total unity in its ultimate fashion, the way it is in Atzilus. And Atzilus is, because Atzilus is the expression of God, and God is one and only, so there all that we see is one, even though it has the potential for all these details, because Atzilus is about creation. And therefore, Shehu Elam Ha'achdus, that's really the what's called the world of unity, because it's not yet created anything. It's still the idea that there's going to be creation, but it's the God who's going to create, and that's the world of Atzilus. So even though there's already Tzimtzum involved, but we've already learned recently that there's Tzimtzum even before Tzimtzum, because the fact that there should be a focal point that anything that God is thinking about is already a Tzimtzum, because it's something where there will be something in particular. But it's godly at that plane. Nothing has happened yet. Nothing has become of it until there's creation. And that's the idea of Atzilus. On Shabbos, everything is able to then be elevated to that idea, to that point. Then, when Shabbos elevates everything, so Malchus then is unites, and it separates off from any other realm, the other side. Now what happens is there's a transition and a transformation from the mundane and the weekday to the Shabbos. So the Shleisa the Maila Shabbat. So the first time in Shabbos when this starts to happen, and that's why we say this passage when we do, it begins at Ma'ariv, the evening service of Shabbos. The Hoi Sachadas, that's when they unite. But remember, okay, we'll talk about this soon, but the prayer is the onset of Shabbos. And that's when the Zohar explains that this fusion starts to happen, the elevation of Shabbos, Beroza de Echad, in this mystery of oneness, Kat Ayel Shabbata, when Shabbos comes, and then when Shabbos is approaching, Shazau Bizman the taste for Shabbos, this is the time that it's a mitzvah also to increase the Shabbos. You have to start Shabbos a little early. We add on to Shabbos. It's explained also in a historical sense that the Chodoidi, which is the hymn very popular, was said by the Kabbalists in Tzvas a little over 500 years ago, Rabbi Shlomo Al-Kabetz, and the Chodoidi he went out with his students and said, let's go and greet the Shabbos. And the words are, of course, very potent words. They're really about ourselves and about how we can elevate our lives also, not be totally preoccupied with the mundane, but look at the deeper thing and don't get stuck in something, but get out of it, etc., etc. Focus on it at one time, you'll see that there's much depth to the words of the Chodoidi in our own lives and our own struggles. That being said, it says here that the saying of the Chodoidi was specifically in the field, b'chutz. That's when it was originally at its inception. V'dugmos bizman who eating taste for Shabbos, and the way that could be in terms of time. That would be the additional part that we add on to Shabbos. In other words, we went out to the field before Shabbos. And Shehu Chelik Miyei Mashishi Shenapach Li Shabbos. It's part of Friday that becomes Shabbos, because once you start Shabbos, that becomes holy, and then work is forbidden, etc., etc., from when you start Shabbos. She'os Tzarech Li Ha'achona Shabbos. Then there has to be a preparation for Shabbos. Al Derech Moshel Mi Shetzarech Li Kones El Heichel HaMelech. The analogy is, if somebody has to go into the king's chamber, Penima, in the inner chamber, tzarich lochanis, has to be able to prepare yourself. L'takin levushov, shleirem lichluch, to make sure you're dressed properly. Shouldn't be dirty clothing. There shouldn't be any stains. V'nois lozet tzarich sheyeh by taste of sefer v'hida, and you have to get dressed extra special, with your best, with beauty and adorned properly. Shezehu shemamshich ve'is atras b'chama itin legabe malka kadisha. That's why the passage continues by saying, and it is crowned with several crowns for the holy king. Kemoshul isha nechneses legabe bailas shemiskashetes be'atores yofes miavonim tevis margolius. And the analogy would be like a woman who goes in to her husband and she gets all dressed up and adorns herself with many pretty and beautiful tiaras and crowns that are made from gemstones and precious stones, and this increases in the beauty. Shanasa, now how is this in the spiritual sense? We get this. We're crowning ourselves through what we do in terms of our day-to-day struggles, when we overcome them and we don't do what we're not supposed to do, and when we do, we elevate the world through performing mitzvahs. Through the refinement of the 288 sparks, which are referred to as stones, bechinas doimim. Why are they stones? Because they're inanimate. They aren't yet. They have fallen away, and then they have to be brought up. But otherwise, they're not. Nothing can be done of them. It's just a stone. So stone is the ultimate inanimate. That's why it's called. Now we're saying make it precious stones. When they are refined, they become like a good precious stone which illuminates, which shines, radiates. Till we are able to bring them in as a crown on the head. When we refine all the sparks, so any type of angry rulers. We'll see how it's translated by Rabbi Menachem Mendel here in the Siddur. But any this anger and any judgment all flee. They all run away, and they're all out of it. They're all not connected. When everything holy comes along, then all powers of wrath and all adversaries flee from her and vanish, and no other power reigns in any of the worlds. Her countenance is irradiated with supernal light, and she crowns herself here below with the holy people, all of whom are crowned with new souls. The Rebbe will explain the rest of these parts of the passage too. So, the reference here to the anger and the sometimes the nitty-gritty, the preoccupation with things and getting bogged down and stuck on things that are really insignificant, and we make them like the most significant thing in our lives, and we all know what it's talking about. But when we are able to focus and elevate, so then these things dissipate on their own. They run away. The this severity becomes totally submissive. It's submitted. It goes away. Subservient. Not just the severity, the tzimtzum, the concentration that you have to get broken down into nitty gritty in its simplest sense. Even when it's for a holy thing, and what we know as the what's necessary, that also gives way for the bigger picture. And it is adorning and crowning in the lower realm, in the holy people. And everybody is adorned and crowned with a new soul. Besides the fact that we spoke already about the crown a little earlier, like the one who puts on several crowns through the refining of the world, that those stones have become precious stones. We speak here with the ones who make these crowns. That is specifically the souls of Israel. Get out your yellow highlighters. And therefore, in the souls, the Malchus is the crowned, the level of Malchus, when it elevates itself to get out of the mundane of the weekday and go into Shabbos. But these crowns that are made through the souls are the lower level of crowns, and that we are only able, the way it's done down here. The Hainu Bechinas Tesfiris Shabbat Mislapshin B'Biyah. These are the 9 spheres, the way they are adorned in Biyah. Now, why is it 9 and not 10? So this is a bit of the discussion, because Malchus really creation starts. It says elsewhere in Chassidus, like it hit the ground running. You would say Malchus is the last Sfira, but it's really the first. It starts from Malchus and then goes then to the next. In other words, as high up as you go, and happens, by the way, infinite. This is a very hard concept. It's infinite going north, supernally, right? But on whatever realm it is, the definition starts from Malchus. Even though, wait a minute, but Malchus is the female that is receiving from the Spheres before, right? And Malchus is the some point of all this. So where were they? That's first, and that's where it breaks off, but it's really nothing. So then it becomes so here it's discussing the 9, because the 10th one, Malchus, is always the lowest level, is always the top level of the next of the next realm. So that Malchus of Atzilus is the exact same thing as Chochmah of Bria, and for that matter, where does Kesser fit in here? And that's in we saying the undefined part, but in the defined part would be Chochmah, and therefore it's discussed. It's just a simple thing. This is a lot to be expounded on, but that's why it says the 9 Spheres. When they come into Bia, the lower worlds, the ilu b'chinas Kesser shebo nasa Torah me'etzem habirurim, and then there's we're talking here about the crowns that Klal Yisrael makes through performing the mitzvahs are in the all of the spheres, but the way they are in the lower realms. Now, the crown of it is from the mere fact that there is something happening from all of this refinement. That's the whole general sense. And like we said, that's why Kesser is not the level. The Malchus becomes the Chochmah. Kesser is the mere fact that there is a method, that there is action, there is something going on. So that happens from the mere fact that we are working. So, and in addition to this lower level of crown, there's also the crown, because everyone gets an extra soul on Shabbos. It's like a new soul. That's like the crown which is on top of a head. Now, just very briefly, a crown is nothing, and a crown is everything. And that's why in certain places they say it's the crown versus whatever, because the crown represents everything. So it's the symbol, but it's the symbol that symbolizes everything. This it says, everyone is crowned with a new soul. And then it says, like, now, just another interesting piece here. So, then the commencement of the prayer is to bless her with joy and radiant countenance. So, remember we said that this is right at the beginning of Ma'ariv. We say this right after Kabbalah Shabbos, right before the Ma'ariv part. So, V'loimar Baruch es Hashem Hamvoirach. And then the first part of Ma'ariv is when we say Baruch Hu. Now you might ask technical questions. Yes. There is and according to our Nusach, there is a Kaddish. Others, by the way, not every Nusach has the Kaddish there, but the Alter Rebbe did put in a Kaddish here after a passage of Zohar, because he looked at that as sufficient a piece of Torah that Kaddish could be said. That's a long discussion in and of itself. And another piece is that in our Siddur, I have the small version over here, in the gray shaded in area. The other Siddur, where it's not gray shaded in, it says if somebody's not davening with a minyan, they continue the passage. From Kegavna, they say the Veloimar. And now it has been said, I've heard from some that say that the Rebbe, when he read the passage of Kegavna, it looked like he was reading all the way till the end of the passage. Even when he was praying publicly, whatever it is, because it's the whole passage of the Zohar. I don't know. I can't say that I didn't hear it, didn't necessarily see it. I saw him looking at the page, etc. And you can't tell, exactly, but so it has been said. Because it's the continuation of the passage. Now, the reason why in a simplest say, it says, and we say Baruch Hashem Avoidach. So when you're davening with the minyan, that's what is actually being said. Bless God. But then if one is not with a quorum where you don't say that, so then you could say this passage in Zohar, at least you're saying these words, and then, but there's more wording here. So therefore he says, and say, bless the Lord who is blessed, etc. So, and just to say that the word es refers to Shabbos evening. Blessed be the Lord who is blessed, is that which elicits the blessings from the source of life, and the place from whence issues all streams to irrigate all things. That I was going to discuss this passage. And because it is the source, the mystery of the sign, quote unquote, it is called the blessed. It is the stream of the wellspring, and since the blessings, reach there, they all flow for all eternity. And this is the meaning of blessed be the Lord who is blessed for all eternity. So Pirush, Es Hashem hu b'chinas malchus, God, which is the level at the level of malchus, which is the kingdom, so to speak. Shuklolus choch beis asvun me aleph atov, which is all of the letters of the holy alphabet, the holy aleph base, from aleph till tov. Shenikra es havaya tofel lahavaya es. The word es is spelled by the first letter and the last letter, tov. First letter is aleph, the last letter is tov. So that spells es. Interesting. The word in Aramaic for letters and the word in Hebrew for letters also include in it the letter aleph and the letter tov. It also includes in it the vav, which is the idea of hamshacha, a line. So it means from all of them together. So again, Malchus, which is the meaning, it has everything in it. Malchus includes everything. So it's the 22 letters from Aleph to Tov, Shenikra Es Havaya. That's what it says. It doesn't say Baruch Hu Hashem Hamvarach. It says Baruch Hu Et Hashem. Es Hashem Hamvarach. Bless, and Es, the word Es in Hebrew is the, but it's also hard to describe because we don't have an exact word like that in the English language. So, Tov Havaya, the word the is really secondary, subservient to the word that it's being described. The Inyan HaBracha Loimar Baruch Es Hashem, the idea of the blessing, which also means to draw in a blessed way, to say blessed Es Hashem, God. To bring it in a general sense, in the all-encompassing light, so to speak, so that then you will be able to have it in an inner, meaningful, significant way, and that flow comes in. And that's also like the mimer that we have in the Chadoidi. The first is before there's a relationship, there has to be courtship, etc., and then there's the relationship to the ultimate relationship. That's from the beginning of prayer. Before the fusion that will happen in its innermost sense, with the innermost light of prayer, it has to be blessed with happiness and joy, and with a radiant face, with an illuminating face, from the source of all blessing. Like it finishes off that this is the blessing that issues forth from the source of life. The Yuv and Akesher, now that I was going to say, what's all this about? And he's speaking about this, the Shabbos for Pesach, so now the Rebbe ties it all together. The Yuv and Akesher, Shabbos Hagadol, Al Pi Mashakosov Tzemach Tzadik B'Natei Shom. We can understand now what is the connection, the bond to the Exodus from Egypt and the great Shabbos, the Shabbos before Pesach. Al Pi Mashakosov Tzemach Tzadik B'Natei Shom, according to what the Tzemach Tzedek says in the mimer that we referred to earlier. But Pirush Maimon Zohar, when he explains the passage of the Zohar, al posuk v'agudosei al eretz yisoda, the verses in Amos which says that which is bound together is what founded is on earth. It's founded on earth. Now, aguda means le'agoid means to bring together many things. That's what an aguda is. At Omar, like it says there in the Zohar, like you would say, Pesach Mitzrayim regarding the Exodus from Egypt. What happened? God said that you should v'lakachtem agudas ezoiv. Remember at the time when God says to take the Passover offering, He said to take a bundle. A bundle again is something which you grouping of grass, of azov grass. It's translated different ways, whatever it may be. Do I remember correctly? With hyssop, maybe? It's a different type of grass to make a little brush out of this. And dip that in the blood, right? And then to smear the blood, that had to be done with this. Shesh Levayir, so now in a deeper meaning, al derech Kegavna the inim usiachna. This is the whole thing of taking something which is separate, and putting them all together to make one thing. So this is like this whole passage of like we are uniting. So just like we can focus and bond together and group it, have grouping here, and unite like it is in the supernal realm. That's a parallel track of this union. Therefore, it has to be one thing, and that's what we have to. That's the goal of the world. So that's that verse. V'agudosei al eretz yisoda, v'idei zenase haboine b'shamayim al Yosef. Now, the beginning of that verse is that he builds in heaven in his supernal ways, and therefore, and his grouping once and he's using this to then found and make what he makes on earth. The mevi echad be'echad is really one thing. Umamshich levayir haremes b'tevis eziv, and the Tzemach Tzedek explains what this word for the grass is eziv, which means the grasses that make up the bundle, that make up the brush, etc. So eziv is aleph zayin vav beis. The letter aleph and the letter zayin, the first two letters of the word, and vav beis are the second two letters. Aleph Zayin, hu inyan hamshachas Aleph b'Zayin. Aleph, one, together with a Zayin, is the idea of bringing the one into the seven. Now, what does that mean? Which one is going into which seven? Aleph hu inyan Chochma. Here, the Aleph is representing Chochma, wisdom. The first part, it's still even undeveloped, without even Bina, even though they're always together. But it's that aspect. Rosa the Mekeda Ilah, which is the mystery of the original source. Chachma is the highest of everything. And higher than that, Keser, the encompassment, that the fact that there is even something to have Chachma, and therefore there will be, like we said, it's the goal, and then there's the method, and then there's the result. So let's say Keser is the goal. V'zayin himamidis, and 7 is the attributes, the characteristics, like we explained earlier in the Maimer, the midas on their own, they're all separate and unique. But through the idea of the intellectual part, then they're all able to be not only tolerant of each other, but part of each other, and united as part of the bigger thing through that understanding. That's the idea of a bond that's made up of many parts. Then besides the Aleph going into the Zayin, the godliness and the Chochmah going into the 7 midas, we also have the Vav, the 6 going into the 2. What is the 6 and what is the 2? Vavu b'chinas haTiferes. So Vav is the level of Tiferes, which is made up, beauty, made up of kindness and severity together, and that's called 6 because if you take the 3 intellectual capacities, that's 1, 2, 3, and then the first 3 of the characteristics of the emotional is Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes is number 4, 5, and 6. So Tiferes is number 6. That's the Vav. Vav is the 6th letter. Beis, Bechinas HaMalchus. Now, Beis, in this is referring to Malchus. The second thing, there's the first, all the other realms, and Malchus, which is everything together. But why is that? Remember, we only have Malchus because of creation. The world is also referred to by this same Beis, the second letter, which is Malchus, and the world, Nivra bebeis dafke, it was created with the Beis. First letter of the Torah is Beis. V'chein hascholas haTorah bebeis dafke, shehu simen bracha. And that is a symbol of blessing. The word for blessing, which means to draw in, that is also with the letter Beis. Now it says here, the reference to Zohar, there's also the idea that really there's a discussion. All the letters really wanted the Torah to start with it, and the letter Tav came first, and each one, there's something called Esis Derbakiv and other places. Each one, there's something negative, with a negative connotation that begins with its letter. So when the Torah got to Beis, so God says, "Yeah, I'm going to take you because it starts." The word bracha starts with Beis. You're going to start the Torah. So Aleph came. Now it happens to be that Aleph also is the first letter of the opposite of a blessing in Hebrew. Starts with an Aleph. But it said that, hey, wait a minute, I never got my chance because you already started. I didn't even present my case. And God says the Ten Commandments will start with an Aleph. That's Anoichi, Kometz Aleph. Okay. So, שזהו, שהאילם בבייס דווקא, נצח חוזתר בבייס דווקא שהוא סימן ברכה ונטל זה, יש גם ייחוד, it's called שני ייחודים דעוז. You have also this idea of the first part of the word Ezoiv, which is also the idea of a fusion and a union of the two, the way it's united to have the Aleph brought into the Zion, the Chochmah into the Hamshachas Aleph, Zion, Vav Beis. You have these two unions are also united. So it's a union. Those are also united. And the Vav Beis, Hamshachas Vav Beis, is a good as Ezoiv. That's the idea of a bundle of this grass in the Kabbalistic sense. Now, even though we say that the way the wisdom is then imbuing the 7 attributes, that's the concept of what's called the supernal union, Yichud Eloh, and then there's what's called Yichud Tato, which in a sense of that we could relate to is the lower realms, let's say, something that we can at least work on. The upper Yichudim is the more spiritual, the godly. Let's just leave it at that for this moment. And it's defined also by the Bittul, Yichudi Eloh is Bittul B'Mtzias. Something that doesn't even exist anymore because it's part of God. It's totally sucked up completely by godliness. Vayichud Devav Beis, the second type of the union, that's the lower fusion and union, Bittul Hayesh, which is not just doesn't exist anymore because it's part of the greater thing, but therefore it's the abolition and the abolishment of that you may exist, and there has to be then subdued, etc. But all these together are united. That we all can focus on the fact and reflect that there's the supernal one, and that's how we're created, and we're all part of that. So this oneness can all come together. In a bittul, for this we have to have the proper submission. Bittul, al eretz yisod, that is the idea of all coming together as a bond. That's what forms the earth. That's what makes the world. Eretz daika. What is the world here is called Eretz, land. Specifically, now, earth is where the grass grows. That's the idea of the bundle of this grass. In this grass is actually the simplest and the lowest part of vegetation. That illustrates then, and is an example of submission, total submission, and subjugation, and nullification, and subservience, etc. Explained in the discourses that explained the red heifer, similar also to what we learned recently. Which they always come before the the discourses on the Parsha Chodesh, which is after, like we learned last week, after the Parshas Pora. First goes the portion of the red heifer, that's the purification. Then there's a Chodesh to have the Pesach, to set up the calendar, to get into life after you're pure, you work on the purification, get more involved. Just like so, the discourses reflect the Torah readings in that order. Maybe the will of God that through studying all these things, through general spreading the wellsprings of Chassidus, should come speedily, specifically, speedily, very fast, to the fulfill the fulfillment of the promise that the Mashiach gave to the Baal Shem Tov, that when your well springs will be spread forth to the outside, the Master will come, that's the King Mashiach. Then we'll be able to fulfill the bringing of the Passover offering in its literal sense, and serving God in the holy temple. We'll eat from the offerings of the festival and the Passover offerings, that'll also include serving God through poetic song, and like the song will be, the future to come, Mashiach comes with a harp of 8 strands, like it's explained in the concept when it says that the Beis Hamikdash was inaugurated on the 8th day after they had 7 days of preparation and practice. The 8th day was inaugurated. There, that's explained also in a very deep concept of what 8 is. And then it says also Shakina the Losid Lovehu Shal Shmein Nimin, the harp of when Mashiach comes has 8 strands, right? There's really the 7 musical notes, but the Mashiach will have the 8th, which is higher than regular. It also says elsewhere that it'll be a harp of 10 strands. So these 8 strands include also the harp of 10 strands, like it says in Psalms 94, like it'll be on the harp of the 10 there. It says the 10 is a reference to the harp of 10 strands. It's like the 8th day, which is the first day of Nisan, which we just had, the beginning of this week. That they took 10 crowns. Rashi talks about it in Chumash, in the Parsha. We're going to read about it also. We already read it, and we'll read about it again. Rashi mentions it more than once. But all the special things that happened on that day, including the inauguration of the sanctuary and the things in the sanctuary, etc., etc. But Bias Mashiach Tzidkenu will have all of these things when Mashiach comes, in a way that it immediately will be redeemed by Gol Didan, in our redemption, in a quick redemption. Speedily nowadays, actually so.